Hi, and welcome to Recovery His Way on the campus of His Way in Huntsville, Alabama. I'm Stuart Whiting, and I'm sitting down once again with our director, Tom Reynolds.
Good to be with you, Stuart.
Hey, Tom. It's been a while since we've sat down and had a discussion.
We've had a lot of different interesting people we've had a chance to talk to.
Yeah, we want to do a lot of different things with this podcast and this time together. But maybe let's spend a few minutes just kind of catching up on the state of the program and things going on, and just kind of what the vibe is around the house and what's happening. So what comes to mind when I, kind of throw that at you?
Right. Well, a lot of good things are happening. It's been an exciting time. Of course, we've implemented a new program. So we're moving from a 6-month program to a 9-month program, which was intended for a couple of reasons. One, to give guys more time to get ready to go to work, so they get more time to really work on the recovery before they go to work, because we're finding a lot of guys were kind of losing their focus on recovery as soon as they got a job. So they're staying longer to do that. And then we're also beginning, in fact, tomorrow we begin having the GED taught here, and we're going to start having a number of community college classes offered here that the guys are excited about. So we're putting an educational track in, and we've really found that with our guys who are going through the program over the years, that the guys who really pursue the educational piece, kind of totally change the trajectory of their life, really, lift that glass ceiling and get them in a place where they have never imagined going before. So,
I know you've always encouraged additional education or finishing a GED or whatever that may be, but now having things offered here on our campus from time to time is really going to make that a lot easier for a guy to participate in.
Huge. It's now going to be a requirement. In order to complete the recovery program, you have to have an educational piece. And if you don't have your GED, you have to get your GED, which is also hitting with a little pushback, because there's some guys who are intimidated by that. A lot of guys who have chosen not to get a GED because it's intimidated them over the years. So we were actually discussing that a few minutes ago, that's still really important, because one of the driving forces behind addiction is fear, and letting those fears dominate and rule your life. And so really the idea of pursuing this is also a way to kind of break that fear cycle down in their lives, which I think also ultimately is going to help them with their sobriety.
Yeah, I liked going to school, but quite honestly, if you asked me 15, 20, 30 years after I'm done with school to go back to, do that, I can see where a little pushback comes in. But knowing the benefit that comes from that, at least putting in the work and making the effort, along with the other programs we're doing, is obviously really important.
Right.
That it's important.
So that's one of the big things happening is that going on. Of course, we got Easter coming up too, and I'm very excited about that. A couple years ago, we had our first sunrise service here, and I really found that special. And maybe part of it's my own personal background. I remember as a kid going to those, and even though at the time I thought they were way too early in the morning and way too boring, now I really find meaning of that in my own faith. And so having that here, I'm excited about the opportunity, and I'm excited particularly about the fact that it's going to be, in my mind, I hope, kind of a marking point for us annually as a ministry, as we celebrate rebirth and resurrection, that we can really celebrate with, because that's what this is about. It's about the resurrection of dead lives coming to have meaning. It's about the rebuilding of life and the rebirth of these men's lives. And many of them can definitely identify with the fact that they came in here dead and they're leaving alive. And so that's one of the things we're really going to celebrate, and both in terms, and one of the things I really want to focus on is the idea of the blessing of eternal life. One of the things that obviously is a recovery program, we want to help guys get sobriety. We're trying to, they're concerned about their career path and their family relationships and their legal situations and a lot of those things. But ultimately our focus is their soul and their spiritual destiny. And so that's really what I want to celebrate, is the fact that even in cases where guys maybe have lost their lives in this past year, that there's still a celebration, because virtually all of them came to know the Lord and came into a relationship with Christ while they were here. So when they did pass away, their family now looks forward to that hope and that spiritual future that they can have.
Yeah, I know we're asked about what our success rate is, and there's a lot of ways to quantify that or to try to quantify it.
Right.
But the most important to us is that 100% of the men who come in this program are going to be introduced to the gospel in a meaningful way, planting seeds, and whether that's one day or 9 months, whatever it may be. And I do I'm looking forward to Easter also, because I know part of that is going to be reading off the names of guys who've committed their lives to Christ while they've been here, just within the last 12 months. And I believe that's 36, I think, is the number on there. And, I think in terms of our vision to rally, mission-oriented churches to this kind of program, whether it's at His Way or reaching out in other places, but a Christ-centered recovery. And just to know that there are, when Jesus says that the fields are white unto harvest, I mean, you see it here. Absolutely. And the guy, like I said, trying to convince Christians all the time that they are in constant need of the Savior can be a difficult thing. But guys who are struggling with substance abuse, they know they need something new, and that's always very impactful to see adults that are coming to Christ. Right. And changing their trajectory of their life. Right. And so, I mean, what a great thing to be a part of.
Right. And I'm just very excited. I mean, one of the features of this one that I'm probably most excited about, most special to me, is that one of the young men who passed away this past year became a Christian when he was here. And his father is going to share for a few minutes about the impact of his son's death upon their family. And yet one of the things that, he and I have shared a lot about is the fact that, his father is a very successful businessman who has not considered spiritual things very strongly in his life. And that he shared with me, just that how it's really changed his focus toward the spiritual, because he knows where Ryan is and he wants to make sure that he's going to be with him one day. Right. And so that really, therefore, again, that ministry to that one guy begins to impact a whole family. Totally. And that's the beauty of what God's doing here.
And then we also have some kind of turning directions a little bit. We're building a new thrift store right down the road to replace the one that we've been leasing, which is also really close to us. And what a blessing the thrift stores are for us. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, it's incredible. Obviously, we continue to be impacted financially by it, obviously, as the thrift stores continue to be increasingly successful in terms of bringing in revenue to help support the ministry. So that's been huge. It's also been a blessing, in the fact that it does give us that interface with the community. Most residents are not going to come out to most residents of the city of Huntsville or the community aren't going to typically come out to our campus and experience what happens with the guys, but they will experience a thrift store. And so that's one of the great ways that we have to interface with the community and really tell our story and connect with people. And it's also been exciting that how many people we've gotten jobs and got to employ that way. And a lot of times they begin as volunteers and they end up with careers. I think even some of the people who manage our thrift stores today and even lead this whole thrift store initiative started out kind of volunteering and helping out in some ways and developed a passion for it, and it's really been a huge blessing. Of course, all of our guys in the program go to the thrift stores and do that as volunteers, and in some cases, particularly ones that are difficult to employ situations, either because of legal situations or maybe health reasons or whatever, it's hard to find a position for them. We usually can employ them at the thrift store and help them start getting that career back built up. And many of them have even stayed at the thrift store for long periods of time and have created careers. In fact, I was talking to one of our guys just this week who I don't typically talk to, graduated a 3 years ago, and has been one of our leaders now in one of the thrift stores. He called me asking what does he need to do in order to get the education necessary to be a counselor for guys in recovery. And he's a guy that drives a truck and fills up the box truck and delivers things and that kind of stuff, and now is wanting to see how he can get back into school and how he can educate himself and really become prepared and equipped to impact the lives of
and had the thrift store position not been there for the past couple of years, who knows? It's a way to continue to
Right.
be tied to the organization and have good employment and be around people who are still really helping in recovery for
Absolutely.
him. And that's,
And the whole volunteer thing is so important. I know, we've been interviewing a lot of people who have volunteered and are volunteering out here in a lot of different ways. I mean, some of them have been volunteer teachers, some of them board members, so different people volunteering in different kind of ways, and how important that volunteer aspect is to a program like ours. Because one, obviously we couldn't afford to pay everybody that's involved with the guys out here. I mean, there's an army of people that are engaged in this process every day, helping to affect these guys' lives. We could never have been able to do that at the level that we have if we had to pay everybody to do it. So the volunteer is incredibly important that way. But it's also important in that it gives, volunteering gives people an outlet that's different than a job. They're no longer doing it for a paycheck. They're not doing it because it's an obligation. They're doing it because of a passion. And, it becomes that passion that becomes like a hobby, right? We all like to have our hobbies because it's that thing we do that sometimes our hobbies are kind of like we have our jobs so we can afford our hobby, type of thing. And that's really our passion. That's really the thing we love. And volunteering really can be that way in a ministry like this where people are passionately involved in something that matters most to them. And so I think it's a great way for people to express that. I think it's a great blessing for people who volunteer. I think all of us need our lives. God has wired us that we need more in our lives than just a paying job, I think, or even a career. We need meaning and purpose in our lives. And sometimes we find those things in our careers, and sometimes we find those things in other ways. And I think volunteering becomes a great avenue in which to express that passion and really allow yourself to work in that purpose. And particularly when you deal with like retiring people who are wrapping up their careers. I mean, what more significant thing does a person need than when you've devoted yourself for 35, 40 years in a profession, all of a sudden you're going to stop that. And what are you going to retire to? What is going to be your purpose, your life goal? And so many people struggle with that. And what a great opportunity to volunteer and be engaged in something like this and really find almost a second career that can really maybe bring as much blessing, if not more blessing, than your first. Yeah,
we've interviewed a number of our weekly, our routine volunteers, particularly our teachers, on this podcast. There's some that we haven't. Like I said, there's so many people involved. I have a feeling that if we were to say to them, sorry, we no longer need you out here, every week. We're doing something, whatever, and we're taking away that. I think that would probably not go over so well because it is an integral part of their weekly schedule, and more than that, like you're speaking to, it becomes part of really who they are and where they're finding fulfillment in just filling up their schedule, but in living out their faith in a meaningful way. And every one of them has mentioned that when they're interviewed,
right.
Just being involved in the guys' lives. In a way, it seems trivial. On one hand, you're only with, maybe you're teaching an hour or two a week, but you really can get to know the guys and get to know the spirit of what we're doing here as a ministry. And then that almost always, in every case that I'm thinking of, drives to more interaction. And now you do make personal connections with individuals. And now you start seeing, the calling of reaching out to someone and helping someone in need. And you take that on as a personal, mission. Because you are willing to, do something an hour or 2 hours a week.
Right. And
it just blossoms into something that is the most, maybe the most meaningful thing you're doing every week.
Right. I mean, and one of the things I was thinking about this whole experience too is that, so many people we have that are volunteers are very gifted, talented, experienced people. People we could have never afforded. I mean, never, have the training experience that we could have never afforded to have that kind of skill set here. And yet, as a volunteer, they're bringing the maturity, their life experience. I mean, we've had doctors and nurses and professionals in all kind of walks of life come out here and be engaged we could have never dreamed of being able to afford a person like that, and yet they're doing it as a volunteer, and they're bringing all that skill and experience. And one of the things that's really cool too is that most of the guys who are in this program have never had an opportunity to interact with people of that success level,
right,
of that level of experience in life, and it validates them. They feel like all of a sudden I have a friend who's a doctor, I have a friend who's an attorney, I have a friend who's an engineer or a professional, a computer person. That's something they've never known before. They've had friends who kind of run the streets and in and out of prison with them or something like that. So to develop that new caliber of friend and relationship is incredibly validating to them, and it then connects them with a community of people who can support them and give them opportunities that they would have never dreamed of.
I can think of several of our graduates who have mentioned specifically that point at their graduation, that, I've come in contact with, these different people on staff and volunteers, and how it almost creates a new vision for what they're like. I mean, I'm thinking one particular graduate who's still part of our staff now as a house leader, who is, I think because of that experience, he's been driven to, I want to, further my education, and he's in college now, and very, very different life than he had, before he came into his way.
Right.
Just because of the influence of the people, not even necessarily the program and the curriculum, but, being around people who have a different outlook on life.
Right. And another thing it communicates to the guys, I think, is really important, is a volunteer says that you matter, right? Because I'm not here for a paycheck. I'm not here to pay my mortgage. I'm not here to get gas in my car. In fact, I'm spending gas in my car, right, to be with you. And that's, most of these guys, again, they're not used to that. If they're not getting, they're not going to go do anything unless there's a salary attached to it, or an hourly wage attached to it, or some benefit for them. And so they get to see that. And one of the things, obviously, we want to teach them is we want to give them the opportunities to volunteer too, because the same benefit that people in the community find in being involved here is the same benefit that these guys need to start giving back and learning what that means. I mean, Jesus says more blessed to give than receive, right? And so how do we want to bless these guys the most? We want to bless them with the opportunity to give. And so when they see other people volunteering, and they're motivated to do it too, and they begin to totally shift the paradigm, because every addict thinks and is engaged in the world to get something. I'm trying to get this, get that guy to do this for me, get that guy to do that, and all of a sudden it becomes about giving and how can I bless people, how can I serve people, how can I make an impact to help somebody else's life other than mine. That's a dramatic shift, and it's really a shift from addiction to sobriety again, because it's that movement away from self-centeredness and self-gratification into a other-centered, loving, compassionate, giving thing. And so that's a huge paradigm shift that really is about sobriety.
Not just avoiding chemical dependency,
right,
but actually with a new way of thinking,
exactly,
and spiritually. And we've had a couple of great instances with this particular household over the past few months, with the house on their own deciding to get one of their housemates, new teeth, and just raising money on their own. And because, the resident had spent a lot of time homeless and had the kinds of marks, physical marks that come with that. And they said, we want to help him. And then he gets the new teeth and he just can't help but smile. And then recently I know we wrote a blog about it about supporting Make-A-Wish, and just the amount of money that they are willing to give out of really their limited means in most cases. And so the paradigm shift, you just see it in action in a way that you don't necessarily always see among the successful, Christian pods in a way that we wish we would. And, we're sometimes very stingy with our giving in a way that someone out of their limited means, once they have a new vision.
Well, to give you an illustration, I was telling, Scott Martin that we interviewed a while back had done the Make-A-Wish thing and had spearheaded that. And I shared this with him after he found out how much money the guys had given and how it blew him away, is one of our residents who was homeless. He literally was homeless. He had met Christians through a church committed to working with the homeless. So he's very passionate about, this is his church, this is my church, and they created an avenue for him to come here. And so they raised the money for him to get in here. And he came in and he had like $47 in his account. That was his spending money. And when he heard about the Make-A-Wish thing, he asked if he could give 40 of it to that. And I was like, I asked him, I said, are you sure you want it? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, all right, you have 47, you give 40 of it away. Oh, yeah. And I was like, and I struggled. I mean, honestly, I do the books for the guys. I sat there and I was like, okay, I'm going to have to transfer this money from his account over here. And I sat there and I had to pray because I was thinking, on one hand, I thought, well, maybe he's homeless because he's irresponsible with money and this isn't the right thing for him to do. And yet then I said, but I know that it's more blessed to give than receive. So do I want to rob this guy of his blessing because I'm trying to be a good steward of his finances? And so, no, well, we got to give it. And I mean, there's not been a moment that he's not very joyful about that fact. So, I mean, I see that kind of shift in people. Right.
Yeah, and so thinking of the volunteers, I think for someone who would consider getting involved with ministry like this, I think it's really important to just bring whatever gift you have. Right. You don't have to recreate or you have to do something, that you're uncomfortable with or figure out, I don't know how to teach a class. We have I'm thinking of one lady who is very special, who once a month brings a meal on Saturdays. Right. We don't provide the meal over the weekend. That's another part of the food's available for the guys, but they have to do it on their own, which is a good responsibility moment. They tend to cook for each other, and it's actually a real bonding time. Right. But she comes, one Saturday every month. Mm-hmm. And man, the guys look forward to that. Oh, yeah. And, it's special to her and it's something she can do. And she usually brings, like her husband and maybe other people at the church and they serve and the guys know this is not something she has to do for any particular reason, except that out of the goodness of her heart and wanting to bless them. And there's all in a ministry this size and whatever ministry in the area that you may be listening in, they can use whatever you can do probably.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think so many times you hear, recovery ministry. Well, I don't have a recovery story. I don't have anything to offer. Or these are men and I'm a woman. How would I help? Or, these guys are old, I'm young. Or, these guys come from a walk of life I don't know. But everybody has gifts and talents that can be used in a myriad of ways. Your illustration of that's a beautiful one because she not only prepares a meal, but she makes it a very special meal. Mm-hmm. And she sets the tables and she decorates. And the guys feel so honored that she goes to that length to provide this and create this experience, this feast for them that really elevates them and elevates their value again and elevates, not like we're just slopping hogs here, we're actually feeding people who have been created in the image of God and we're lifting up their identity and showing their validity and their significance in the world. And
there's another group at that church she's a part of that's considering doing the same thing, and I've got them talking to each other so that they can think about doing that because they've heard how special it is for her to be here, which is really great. Right. And then we have, speaking of ladies helping here, we've got several ladies who help in our admin part of our office, right, under the direction of our office manager, and in a facility like this, there's all kind of filing and updating spreadsheets, and there's just and they are a blessing because they come in the afternoons and help with that. And so the message is, just reach out to a ministry and say, hey, I can do this. Is this something you can use me in? Right. And they'll be blessed by it for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Whether it's gardening skills or lawn care or painting or, is it just spending time with people? I have a guy right now who's a graduate of the program and, he had been out here back when I think we interviewed Andrew and Matt one time about coming out here and doing CrossFit and all the stuff that they did. Now they connect with guys and how they personally got, and they're still involved to this day, even though CrossFit's long since left the structure. This guy came in and said, hey, I want to reignite that. I want to kind of get him back out and hang out in the weight room and kind of lift weights with the guys and build that fellowship again. And so he's finding a way to volunteer. Yeah. And this is a guy who graduated our program, a couple years ago, coming back and getting involved in that way. And that's been another thing that's been exciting lately is we've had a number of our former residents and graduates of the program, come back. And a lot of times they're not in the strongest financial position. They're trying to rebuild their own lives, but they know the value of people coming from the outside in, having that exposure, and just the encouragement that it brings. And they know they need it. When they get back in this environment, it reinforces and re-energizes their recovery, as well as they know coming from the outside in is a blessing to them. So it's really neat to see that, hand in glove, kind of everyone mutually being benefited.
Totally, because we know the benefit from the organizational standpoint of all of the extra volunteer hours and training and teaching that goes on. But then really on the personal level, you've already quoted it, it's more blessed to give than to receive. We know when we sacrifice our time and money and energy that we are the ones that are blessed. And so, allow that blessing to work in your life if you're thinking about, doing this. Give it a shot.
Right.
And you'll find that it's super important and meaningful going forward.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think, and so many times, I think particularly we are uncomfortable getting involved with something when we don't know what the end is going to be. Mm. And this is one of those things where you don't know what the end's going to be. But I can guarantee you, with my experience, I started as a volunteer myself. Mm-hmm. With my experience and the experience of everyone that we've seen, the end is much more glorious than anything you would have ever dreamed of when you started the endeavor in the first place. So it may not be where you expect it to be. It is a really rewarding experience. And so just take the risk. Take the risk. And don't try to script it. Let God work it in His way. Yeah. Simply make yourself available.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's a good challenge for all of us to consider, and we're going to go out on. So, if you have any questions about getting involved with His Way, we invite you to visit our website, hiswayinc.org, or find a ministry, a group in your area that you can bless with your volunteering.